Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. I think that we can all agree that a 5-week break is far too long, because MotoGP was back this weekend, and wow, what an absolutely sensational Silverstone weekend it was, because there was action from the get-go. So from Friday we realised it was probably going to be a wet weekend, and we saw wet practices, we saw wet qualifying, I guess we could call it an almost wet sprint race, and we had a flag-to-flag MotoGP race on the Sunday. And honestly, I don't know where to start with this weekend because it was absolutely so sensational. It started with Moto3, which was an absolutely wild race, and the moment it finished, it was absolutely like, oh wow, the other two are not going to live up to that. And then we saw MotoGP, and that was just so unexpected, I suppose. It didn't give me the results I honestly was almost certain were going to happen. And then we have Moto2, which did so similar, and that's one of the best things about motorcycle racing and Grand Prix motorcycle racing, is that you truly don't know what is going to happen. And yeah, I've gone on an introduction tangent already, so I digress. Let's start with Moto3. My predictions for Moto3 were in P1, Masia, P2, Holgado, and P3, Onchu. I got one person on the podium correct. I got Holgado. He wasn't in P2, he was in P3, and yeah, let's talk about Masia. He crashed out from the lead, an absolute shock when he did. I couldn't believe it. I'm sure he will be absolutely kicking himself because, yeah, I had him down for the win, and it was so surprising that he didn't actually stay on the bike. Very unexpected. In P2 we had Sasaki. I was very impressed with his performance, but the absolute star of the show in Moto3, and definitely one of the stars of the whole weekend, has to be David Alonso. His very first Grand Prix win, his first win, what a win it was, coming from last place on the grid and winning. A 27 place gain, absolutely incredible. He's our first Colombian Grand Prix race winner, and I'm sure he will be one of the happiest people on the planet tonight, because that performance was absolutely incredible. He's in his rookie season in Moto3, and to win a race from last place. Wow, he has something to be very proud of tonight. Technically it wasn't last place because Ogden, who was in P2, stalled, and that was heartbreaking because he is British and it was a British race, and yeah, your heart did a little stutter for that poor guy, but does not take away from the absolutely incredible performance from David Alonso. Moving on to Moto2. Poor Jake Dixon. I feel for the guy. I had him in my predictions as winning because all those vibes from the last race, it definitely wasn't his weekend. No matter what you think, it's always gutting when you see something, well, a performance like this, shall we say. So let's start with my predictions. In P3 I had Ayagura, P2 I had Pedro Acosta, and P1 I had Jake Dixon. Let's go to the results. In P3 there was Pedro Acosta, in P2 Aaron Canet, and in P1 Furman Aldiger. Where do you even begin with what was this race? So this race actually came after the MotoGP race this weekend. I believe it's to keep it at a certain time slot for Europe. Personally, I think that's an outdated tradition. Like, if I can get up at 2 a.m. to watch this racing, everyone can at least sacrifice something. Maybe I'm just a bit too dedicated. Although I have to be right now, because at the moment, because I've all been enrolled in this beta website and beta app, there's no spoiler-free option on the TV. So if I don't want spoilers, I had to get up and watch it live, which means ridiculous o'clock. I mean, I'd be doing it anyway, but not everyone's like me. People have lives, unlike me. So, yeah, come on. At least give us a spoiler-free option immediately so that people can sleep if they want to and they don't live in Europe. But I digress. Where was I? Oh yes, Jake Dixon. He got interviewed right after the incident and it was definitely emotional and a bit aggressive. Really, he should have had some time to cool down. Yeah. I think I'm going to leave it there because I don't like talking about the drama side of things. But overall, an excellent performance from Furman Aldegar. Aaron Canet, I think there's probably a bit of a mental block there for him to win a race. It would have been absolutely incredible if he did, and I'm still going to be holding out for that win. Hopefully it'll be coming soon. And Pedro Acosta bagged some serious championship points, so I think all of those boys are going to be quite happy with their results for this weekend. So let's move on to MotoGP and the talking points. So there were a few moments of very minor controversy. It's actually quite nice to come out of a race weekend and just have good vibes for once. Like, yeah, there was a questionable call with the stewards. So Pecco Bagnaia, it looked like he touched the green. However, the sensors didn't go off. The stewards confirmed this, and therefore he didn't drop a place in the race. But other than that, it was a pretty seamless weekend. I say seamless weekend. There was a lot of oh my gosh moments, and one of those was definitely when Fabio Quartararo got his fairings ripped off the front and everyone got excited because, oh my gosh, we love naked bikes, because you could see all the wires. I'm sure there are some high-res shots out already. I haven't had time to look because I've just woken up. But wow, I can't wait to stare at them and be like, oh wow, so that's how that works. That's where that connection goes. And it's just really exciting when we get moments like that. Unfortunately, that did mean Fabio didn't have a great weekend. That's an understatement, actually. It was, the icing on the cake of a horrific weekend for the Frenchman. So he had his worst ever qualifying. He ended up qualifying dead last. The world champion qualified dead last. Sorry, previous world champion, but he is still a world champion, and he qualified last. That must have been absolutely mentally draining for Quartararo, and yeah, absolutely gutted for him. On the other side of the garage at Yamaha, Franco Morbidelli actually had a reasonable weekend. Given the news that Alex Rins will be taking his place at Yamaha next year, that sort of puts Frankie Morbidelli on the market, so to speak. There's plenty of rumours and speculation and gossip that he will be moving to VR46 or another Ducati ride. We don't know that yet, and Frankie's definitely got to put his best foot forward to be able to show that he does have the ability that we all know's in there. Unfortunately, after his accident, it sort of took a bit of a back burner. But yeah, I think this weekend he can be quite proud of what he achieved. Out-qualifying Fabio Quartararo is always going to be a good thing, and he put in some pretty good performances in the race as well, so I think he can be pretty comfortable with what he did this weekend. Moving on to the other Japanese manufacturer. So this is actually the first time we've seen all of the riders who started a sprint finish a sprint, which is exciting. Surprising, but exciting. Unfortunately, it didn't go to the next day, and we did have both Joan Mir and Marc Marquez crash out of the main race. Fortunately, both riders were on their feet and okay. It was not surprising that yet again it's been another poor weekend for the Japanese manufacturers. It did look like there was lots of testing going on over the 5-week break, especially for Honda, but yeah, the performance was just poor from the Japanese manufacturers. It's a shame because they do have incredible talent, and one thing to note is we did also see Ika Lekanoa on the grid, and he finished both races, which is really great for him. Hopefully we see some more of him. He definitely has picked up the pace, I think, last time, and he looks a lot more confident on the Honda than he did last time he was out and about. So I think there's definitely a possibility of something being there. It'll be interesting to see if he's back on the bike in Austria or if we get Brattle. It's just a cute little side quest going on there, I think, at Honda, which is quite exciting. But that did mean that we didn't have Alex Rins on the grid this year, meaning we still haven't had a full grid of the riders that we were expecting. Although we did get Paul Espargaro back, and that is so good to see. It's lovely. He performed quite strongly, and he even got points on the Sunday, which is really great considering the absolute extent of the injuries that he suffered back at Portimao. But like I said, we didn't seem to have any major injuries this weekend, which is absolutely astounding because, yeah, it's been a horror season so far in terms of injuries. While we are at the topic of KTM and Gas, Augusto Fernandez, another strong performance from him. He's definitely proving why he's got that MotoGP ride, and he qualified well. He scored really strong points on the Saturday race, so that was the sprint. He didn't have such a good Sunday, however, I think he can be commended for such a great qualifying. Being a rookie and putting it on the second row of the grid, absolutely spectacular performance from him, and it does still mean KTM are in a very awkward situation now that Pole's back, and obviously he stayed on the bike the whole weekend, which sounds terrible to say, but the fact is that he stayed on that bike and showed that he was confident again on a bike, which is absolutely incredible. And the mental strength of all these riders, absolutely astounding and definitely should be commended. At factory KTM, our Australian Jack Miller, he did score points on both days, but I don't know what it is about Jack Miller at KTM. He seems to be starting the races like an absolute rocket ship. He gets off that line and he just boosts it. And it's incredible to watch because he's just straight in the lead, he's straight out there, and you're like, yes, Jack, this is your time to shine. Unfortunately, he doesn't last. The stamina in that KTM and Jack Miller, that package, just isn't there. So rather than finishing in P1 or in podium position, he finished P7 in the sprint and P8 in the main race. I know there's many factors that cause these results, going wide, being pushed out, getting aggressive passes on other riders and things like that, but it's just really, really frustrating. As an Australian fan, because I'm a Kiwi, as an Australian little brother, it's really heart-wrenching because you just want him to perform really strongly, being the only Aussie on the MotoGP grid right now. It's heartbreaking time after time to see it happen again and again. He just gets that great launch, he gets that strong start, and then it just dissolves into nothingness. And hopefully he can get it clicking soon. I know I want everything now, but fingers crossed that over the long term, second half of the season, we can see him up there in podium positions. That does not take away what he has absolutely brought to this KTM team, because the biggest benefactor of Jack Miller moving to KTM is definitely his teammate Brad Binder, because those two as a duo, wow, they're fun to watch, the banter's fun, it's absolutely incredible seeing that team. It just looks like an absolutely fun place to be. So Brad Binder didn't have such a good sprint, so he finished in P9, scoring just a single point, which isn't ideal, but it's more point than Bagnaia got, so that's a big win. And then on the Sunday, he showed why he is a Sunday man, and he finished in P3. And he kept his P3 this time, unlike the previous two where he got demoted a position due to track limits. But yeah, very happy for Brad Binder. Very happy that he's managed to gain some serious points in the championship, and he put on basically his Binder brilliance of a performance, because yeah, he's so smooth to watch on the bike. He knows when to make those aggressive passes, and he is just great fun to have in the paddock. So props, Brad, you did great this weekend. So let's move over to Ducati. We'll start with Gresini Racing. So Fabio Di Gianantonio had a reasonable weekend. So in the wet, he performed brilliantly. It really looked like he'd found something. We thought he was, going to go straight through to... Not straight through. We thought he had potential to get into Q2. Unfortunately, that didn't come to pass, meaning he qualified quite low. Then in the sprint, he did finish in P12. In the main race, he did finish in P13, which is a pretty good performance and recovery. But it was quite harsh because we saw what could have been when he topped one of the free practice sessions. And yeah, it was one of those little tough pills to swallow when you're like, ooh, he might actually have something here. But alas, not to be. Unfortunate. On the other side of the Gresini garage, we had Alex Marquez. Now, he didn't finish the Sunday race, but to be honest, I'm not too upset by that because he got a sprint win. So I am really chuffed for Mini Marquez because since he's been at Ducati, he's really shown the absolute potential he has, and the way he's been able to step out of his brother's shadow has been absolutely wonderful. It was so heartwarming to see him take that podium and get that win. It was really, really exciting, and it showed what a talent he is, especially in semi-mixed conditions. He really seems to find something, and that's really cool, and it's really good to see because he deserves it. He's copped so much flack from being Marc Marquez's brother. It's like, no, he deserves to be on a MotoGP bike just like all of these guys do, and he is showing it on that Ducati. He is showing how incredibly talented he is. He is showing how he can mold himself to the bike rather than have to fight on the bike, and it's just great seeing him take such a step forward. And hopefully this second half of the season we see more performances like this, because we know he's got it in him. And yeah, anytime there's mixed conditions, he's going to be up there, I think. Anyway, moving on to VR46, a very mixed weekend for them. So Luca Marini P11 in the sprint race, so not a really great performance. He did get P10 in the main race, and yeah, we're sort of used to seeing these results from Luca Marini. I wish I could say that I expected more from him. Unfortunately, I think it could be a combination of factors. His height, I think there's a bit of a mental block there now, but overall he is performing pretty averagely, and you can't really fault that. On the other side of the garage, we have Marco Bezzecchi, and this kid is so talented. He got P2 in the sprint, but let's talk about that Sunday. He was performing so well, and he was fighting right there at the front. Unfortunately, he came in a bit too hot on a corner following Pecco Bagnaia, and he lost it. I think he lost the front from memory, and there was going to be no saving that. Fortunately, it was a low side, but it was very, very high speed. It was quite surprising. Normally it's Pecco that bins it, so to see Bezzecchi bin it was a little bit shocking. I really did have him down for the win this weekend, so my fantasy teams didn't perform too strongly, unfortunately for me. But like I said, let's be glad that Bezzecchi wasn't majorly injured, and yeah, this is going to be really good news for Pecco Bagnaia's championship fight. It's going to soften the blow for Jorge Martin and Brad Binder, but yeah, you've really got to feel for Marco Bezzecchi today. He will be really, really gutted, and you could see it as soon as he stood up. You could see the frustration in his body from crashing out, because he's got no one to blame for himself for that one, and it's rather unfortunate for him. One rider I'm actually quite disappointed about this weekend is Johann Zarco. So given the mixed conditions, and given Zarco being much better over a longer race, I thought these longer laps would really suit him. I say disappointed. He finished P4 in the sprint, and then he finished, I can't actually remember off the top of my head, I think it's P10 in the main race. But honestly, I expected him to be podiuming both days with these conditions, so I suppose disappointed is the right terminology for that. In fact, overall, I think Pramac didn't have a good weekend. I don't know if it's because they qualified badly and then they decided to test the new aero and things like that, which I heard about. But yeah, Jorge Martin was not really anywhere as well, so this one's actually going to be quite an important weekend in terms of the championship, because Jorge Martin only finished in P6 in the sprint. He finished P6 in the main race, and while those are really good points to get, let's not forget that Marco Bezzecchi finished in P2 in the sprint, which is 9 points, and we'll talk about Pecco soon, but in terms of the championship, this was not a good weekend for Pramac or Jorge Martin. And yeah, I just think that given the skill of both Pramac Ducatis, we should have been seeing a lot more from them, because they're factory Ducatis, they should be up there. But I suppose while we are on the topic of factory Ducatis, Enea Bastianini also was not comfortable this weekend. So it is, you know, he's still quite new to the bike given his injuries at the start of the year. So I suppose long term, I think we could be looking at something better developing there, and I really hope so, because obviously Enea, we know, has the skill and the talent. Maybe it'll be like last year where he really came into his own in the second half of the season, but yeah, it's unfortunate to see him not performing very strongly this weekend. A lot of that could be down to the fact that he qualified poorly, but yeah, being on the factory Ducati, I was sort of hoping for a top 10 from Bastianini for both days. He finished P13 in the sprint, so unfortunately no points there, and he did not finish in the main race. I do believe he crashed out, which is obviously very unfortunate, but it doesn't bode well, I suppose, for his long-term goals with Ducati. Hopefully, like I said, that he's just not gelled with the bike yet, but yeah, we can only really wait and see for that one. Now, on the other side of the factory Ducati garage, we'll talk about Pecco Bagnaia. Now, this was definitely a weekend of two halves for Bagnaia, so what the heck happened to him on Saturday? I know, well, from memory, he got pushed wide or something similar in the main race on the Saturday, that is, so the sprint race. All these terminologies, really. I know what I want to say, but then I'm like, oh, is it free practice? Is it practice? Is it warm-up? There's just so much to try and piece together in my brain, so I'm going to get things wrong on occasion. Maybe I'll have to start a correction corner or something like that for when I absolutely balls it up, basically. Sorry, tangent aside, back to Pecco Bagnaia. So in the sprint, he finished in P14. Absolute disaster from the world champion. In fact, on the Saturday, if you're a world champion for MotoGP, you had a disaster, because Pecco Bagnaia was the highest world champion in MotoGP at P14, Joan Mir P17, Marc Marquez P18, and Fabio Quartararo P21. Saturday savagery for the world champions, for the MotoGP world champions. Not the, obviously, all of the world champions, because Alex Marquez, the world champion, finished in P1. But you guys know what I mean. Well, at least I hope you do. Sorry, tangent yet again. I must need a break soon. So, Pecco Bagnaia, like I said, P14 in the sprint. It was definitely not his day. Fortunately, he managed to claw it back on the Sunday. He didn't let that Saturday performance get to his head, and he finished in P2. A nice, tidy 20 points for him that he'll have in his bag, and I think he'll be pretty happy with that performance. Because he had some absolutely brilliant battles with Brad Binder and Marco Bezzecchi. It was a really fun race to watch from Pecco's perspective on the Sunday. So, moving to the teams that were definitely the highlights of the weekend, we will start with Cryptodata RNF. Wow. So, we knew that Oliveira had the potential, being a mixed weekend and being, I'd say, a good 95% recovered after that Portimao disaster for him. So we won't start on that side of the garage. We'll start with Raul Fernandez. So Raul had arm pump surgery in the summer break. We knew that he had some sort of mental block also going on due to this. So I think he really managed to build up his confidence again this weekend. So it didn't show on the Saturday. He finished in P19, which was no doubt a disappointing performance for him. He broke those Hondas up, so he was right in between Marc Marquez and Taka Nakagami. But overall, a Saturday to forget for Raul. But on that Sunday, he finished in P10. An absolute brilliant performance from him. I think he can be really happy with that. He finished in front of Augusto Fernandez. He finished just behind Johann Zarco. I think he'll be really happy, and I'm hoping this is the start where he manages to start turning it around and start showing how talented he is on a bike, because he has the talent and he has the potential. He's just got to be able to tap into that potential. But let's talk about Miguel Oliveira. So on the Saturday, he did have a reasonably strong day. Unfortunately, he did finish outside of the points in P10, so just behind Brad Binder and just in front of Luca Marini. But that Sunday performance, wow, Ollie, that was absolutely incredible, and it really does show the absolute talent that Miguel Oliveira has. I seriously think he's quite underrated. Unfortunately, we did have a horror start of the season where he was taken out and injured in 2 separate incidents, which really hampered his season, unfortunately. Otherwise, I think long term this season he would have been up there, and to be honest, I think he could have been fighting for the championship. So that is quite disappointing that we didn't get to see that this season. Hopefully we get to see it next season. But he managed to gain, I believe it was 12 places. So he finished in P4. I think if it had rained just a little bit more, we would have seen Miguel take a podium at the very least. He had the pace for the win at one point. How he did it, I don't know. I think the moment, he feels a droplet of rain, it just gives him a boost. That seems like something that does happen to Miguel. It was truly, truly incredible. And we saw shots of Razlan in the garage, and it was like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, but obviously we all know what we can get with Miguel Oliveira. And so, yeah, it was just really, really wholesome and really, really exciting. And I think that this performance from both Raul Fernandez and Miguel Oliveira is exactly what RNF needed, because I think they needed this boost after such an absolute disaster first half of the season. I really do hope that this shows that, you know, the second half of the season is going to be RNF's time to shine, because they really deserve it. That team is so wholesome, they're so family friendly, and it's just heartwarming to see such a strong performance and to see them being 2 of the 4 Aprilias in the top 10. Admittedly, there are only 4 Aprilias on the grid, but having all 4 of them in the top 10 is just something that's really exciting. I've been an Aprilia fan for, I suppose, since I got on my first bike, because my first bike was an Aprilia. So seeing them come from obscurity to start to really challenge for positions, and especially because right now we're talking about their satellite team, the Aprilia satellite team, the independent team, managed to get both riders in the top 10, and yeah, Miguel Oliveira P4, Raul Fernandez P10. What an absolute brilliant performance from both of those guys. So let's move over to Factory Aprilia. Another absolutely heartwarming garage this weekend. So I think the Aprilia factory will be partying hard this weekend, because Maverick Vinales will start with on the Saturday. He got P3, so a podium, and this actually brings our podium people, not really sure how to say it, the amount of riders on the podium in the sprint this year has been 11. Half of the grid have been on the sprint podium so far this year, and I really like that, because it does show the unpredictable nature of MotoGP. And I guess we were all a bit nervous about the sprints, and I still haven't made my mind up. I guess with this new format change, I think I'll start to enjoy the sprints a lot more, because it does give the riders time to actually do some testing and time to play with the settings and get to know the bike. Now they've got a full free practice session, so that I think will make me less negative towards the sprint races, because they don't have to push from the moment they get there, so I think that's quite a positive thing. I digress. My apologies. Tangent aside, Maverick Vinales was in P3 on the sprint race, so very, very happy for him. In the main race, he got P5 as well. These are both really, really strong performances for Vinales, because we know that the first half of the season he did have a few crashes, but most of all, he seemed plagued by mechanical issues. So we saw smoke coming out of his exhaust at one time, we saw his chain break. So getting a P3 and a P5 will definitely be something that really boosts his confidence. And yeah, I'm very, very happy for him. But the real winner for the Aprilia this weekend has to be Aleix Espargaro. So in the sprint, he finished in P5, quite a comfortable P5. He looked very strong, but I didn't expect him to perform so perfectly on the Sunday. So it was a last lap lunge. He takes the lead from Pecco Bagnaia. I didn't expect it. We knew, you could see it coming. If you're in the Discord, you can see it. You can see the times change where people are like, oh my gosh, Aleix has the pace. Has the pace. And you're like, oh yes, he's gonna do it. Come on, do it. Because, yeah, he's like the uncle of the MotoGP paddock, I feel. We all like him. He's just so wholesome. And yeah, he got his second win. He took it in the last lap from Pecco Bagnaia, and it was an absolute beautiful, beautiful victory for him. And what made it even more heartwarming for me is his whole family were there this time. So last time he won, he called his wife immediately because she wasn't in the paddock, but this time his wife and his kids were there, and seeing him celebrate with them is absolutely so heartwarming, because it was just such a wholesome win, as it was last time with the Aprilia win. Really happy that Aprilia got its second, and just overall really happy that they got all 4 bikes in the top 10, and the captain can be very proud of his performance, and the whole Aprilia team can be, because they definitely deserve this weekend, and it's been a long time coming for them to have such a strong weekend from all 4 bikes. So very happy for Aprilia at the moment. So looking over my predictions, I got one right. A Maverick Vinales for P3 in the sprint. I'm actually quite happy I managed to get one, considering that, it was a race that I didn't really expect. In fact, I got 2. I also put Pecco Bagnaia in P2 in the main race, so I'm actually pretty happy with that results for my predictions, because I made them so far out. I made them a whole week ago from today, so we didn't really know what the weather forecast was going to be like. Admittedly, I don't think my predictions would have changed much. I'm quite disappointed for Marco Bezzecchi, because I did have him down to claw back some serious points from Bagnaia this weekend. Unfortunately, not so lucky. But I'm happy. I'm very happy with this weekend's racing, because we saw some excellent overtakes. I think one of my favourite ones was Miguel Oliveira, when he took the 2 riders in it wasn't quite in one move like we've seen him do before. It was sort of like, when you bunny hop when you're overtaking on the motorway, when you're like, I'll pass this car and then I'll pass the next car, sort of like that. So that was quite an impressive move. But I think my move of the day would have to be Alicia Spargaro on Pecco Bagnaia for the win, because it was absolutely brilliant. He timed it perfectly. It was aggressive, but it was clean. Very impressive overtake. However, that being said, I do think I'm going to have to give my rider of the day to Miguel Oliveira, because absolutely brilliant Sunday performance. Like I said earlier, it shows the talent that kid has, and I'm really hoping we see a lot more of him, and I really want an Aprilia World Champion, and I think if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Miguel Oliveira. So that's it for this week. As always, like and subscribe. Let me know if you think I got anything wrong. If you'd like to hear more of any certain things, feel free to flick us an email, leave a comment. Have a great week, and I will see you again next week.